Welcome, my family. Before we jump in, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. I'd also love to know, where are you watching from and what time is it there? Please hype me on YouTube. Thanks. I should have left when he first looked at me. My name is Alyssa Monroe, 27, and for a year I played a game I thought I could control. Dating married men, slipping into their lives, stealing attention, pretending it meant more than it did. It was a thrill, a secret theater of desire where I was the star. But that night in Riverside, California, in the humid, golden haze of Oakwood Grill, I realized some secrets are alive, hungry, and older than I could ever imagine. I wore red, my blonde hair hidden beneath a wig that I thought made me unrecognizable, invincible. The chandelier lights bounced off crystal glasses, scattering flecks of gold that danced across the quiet, murmuring diners. Nathan Crawford arrived, all sleek confidence and polished charm, his gaze scanning me like a hunter marking prey. Ravishing, he said, and I shivered not from desire, but from something I couldn't name, something slithering beneath the normalcy of the evening. Then the door slammed. Monica, emerald eyes that glimmered too brightly, teeth too sharp. She didn't scream, didn't cry. She didn't need to. The restaurant froze around her. Conversations faded. Knives hung midair. Her voice entered my skull before it left her lips. "Nathan, you bastard." "And you?" My name, spoken with ice and fire curling into my skull. The first thing I felt wasn't fear. It was cold. Ice crawling into my bones, pressing through the blood in my veins. Nathan tried to rise. His skin grayed, veins blackened, and I watched him falter, like life itself was being drained from him. And Monica's smile, it wasn't human. It stretched too far, too perfect. She took my wrist and the chill spread not like cold air, but like a poison threading through my marrow. She whispered, though her lips barely moved, and the words came inside my mind. "Do you know what I do to women like you?" The air warped. The floor felt uneven. When she pushed me toward the kitchen, it wasn't just distance she covered. It was a shift in reality. The walls pressed in. Heat rose from nowhere. The fryer bubbled, though no one touched it. And then, my reflection. I saw myself, no wig, face blistering, peeling, skin bubbling like old paint. Yet when I touched it, it was normal. Smooth, unharmed. I rubbed my cheeks, but the sensation of peeling and itching remained, crawling beneath my skin like insects. I wanted to scratch, to rip it from me, but my hands passed through normal flesh, and every time I looked up at the steel, another patch of skin loosened, a new layer of horror. Her voice again, but not from her mouth. A chorus, faint at first, whispered through the hiss of the fryer. Fragmented thoughts, sharp accusations. "You stole him. You're selfish. You'll rot." The voices twisted together, forming a mosaic of women's betrayals, echoes of their fury, their pain. And through them, Monica's tone rose, dominant, encompassing. "You will wear my ruin." A scream left my throat hollow, mocked by the kitchen itself. I stumbled backward. When officers burst in, they were distant, phantasmal, their faces blurred, stretched like wax. The gunshot rang metallic, unnatural. Monica collapsed, blood spreading across tiles, reflecting faces that weren't mine. They dragged me out, but the kitchen's heat pressed against my lungs. I woke in a hospital bed. Cheeks bruised, arm raw. The mirror above the sink betrayed me. Skin bubbled, peeled, itching in impossible patches. Nurses said Monica was in custody. Lies. I hear her laugh in the hiss of frying oil, see her eyes in reflections everywhere. Sleep became a minefield. I lay awake, trembling, hearing whispers, feeling the wig twitch on my dresser, threads moving as though trying to strangle themselves around my fingers. It had always been a symbol of my temporary self, my disguise, but now it moved without me, a reminder of violation, of Monica invading every fragile identity I built. I stopped leaving my apartment. Even the reflection of streetlights through my blinds felt wrong, stretching like hands reaching from the darkness. I touched my face constantly, trying to soothe the itching, the sensation of skin unzipping. Mirrors became thresholds, doors into spaces where the chorus of women waited with eyes burning, mouths opening to me in accusation. Weeks passed, or maybe days. Time blurred. Every reflection I passed showed a slightly different version of me. One with hair that writhed, one with eyes bleeding, one with a smile that wasn't mine. And always, in every reflection, Monica waited, waiting, patient, perfect. The voices grew louder, more precise. You lied, you took, you betrayed. Sometimes I thought I could respond, but my words bounced back at me, twisted, mocking. I woke from nightmares drenched in sweat, finding the wig tangled around my wrists, strands knotted into shapes I couldn't recognize. One night, drawn by a compulsion I didn't understand, I returned to the restaurant. Oakwood Grill abandoned now, the air stale, silent, but the fryer hissed. I saw faces flickering in the steel surfaces, women I didn't know, their mouths moving in silent accusation. My reflection in the counter showed new patches of peeling, itching skin, yet when I touched it, nothing changed. The wig quivered beside me, strands rising as if alive. I understood then. Monica wasn't just angry. She was a vessel, a magnet for every infidelity, every betrayal, every stolen desire. And she had chosen me, chosen my body, my mind, my very reflection. The whispers became a chorus, a symphony of all the wronged. A living, breathing entity, each voice threading through my nerves like poisoned wire. I ran, but the hallway elongated, walls bending, shadows stretching to trap me. The chandelier lights flickered, casting a kaleidoscope of gold and red that made the floor pulse. Every step echoed, but not with my own weight. Something else followed, a presence moving just behind my vision. At home, mirrors betrayed me worse than the restaurant. My face itched, bubbled, peeled, never the same. The wig lay on the dresser, twisted, moving, a silent accusation. I could feel fingers brushing my hair in the dead of night. Voices whispered from drains, from walls, from the hiss of boiling water, repeating, "You will wear my ruin." I began speaking to the voices, bargaining, apologizing, naming the women I thought they represented. It did nothing. They pressed closer, whispering histories I hadn't lived, memories of stolen lovers and shattered trust. "And Monica?" She laughed. "I don't leave my apartment anymore. I barely sleep. Mirrors, windows, the steel sink in the bathroom, all portals to the chorus, all thresholds to Monica. My skin itches, peels, bubbles. The wig twists beside me like a living thing, and I know the day will come when they will push me through. Sleep has become a distant memory, replaced by the twitching presence of the wig, the peeling of my face in every reflective surface, and the voices growing insistent. They speak not just in fragments, but in sentences now, pleading, demanding, accusing. "We trusted you. You stole him. You must pay. It is no longer just Monica. She is their vessel, and I am the chosen recipient." Every reflection is a doorway, every mirror a thin veil between the chorus and me. The wig moves on its own now. I found it tangled around my doorknob, knotted with fine black strands that weren't mine. Sometimes it flutters like a trapped bird, vibrating with a life of its own. I know that if I leave it, if I ignore it, it will tighten its grip on me, strangle the last remnants of identity I thought were mine. And so I watch it constantly, fearing every twitch. The skin on my face itches relentlessly. Every mirror shows new patches peeling, bubbling, red and raw beneath surfaces that remain smooth to my touch. Scratching does nothing. Rubbing only transfers the sensation, spreading it. I have tried lotions, antiseptics, even fire. Nothing stops it. It is alive, a living accusation written in the language of my own body. I have begun hearing her outside the mirrors. Monica, or some extension of her, whispers in the shadows, in the hiss of faucets, in the wind scraping the blinds. Her voice intertwines with the chorus, a symphony of punishment, of wrath, of the long reach of women betrayed. She tells me things about Nathan, about myself, things I cannot forget. One evening, drawn by a compulsion I could not resist, I returned to Oakwood Grill, now closed, broken, the kitchen like a wound. The fryer hissed, bubbling with voices, not just Monica's, but dozens of women screaming and laughing, whispering their pain. My reflection in the steel counter peeled in real time, new layers forming and falling. I reached to touch it and my hand passed through nothing, but the sensation of burning, itching, crawling remained. The wig lay beside me, quivering. Strands reached for me. When I picked it up, it wrapped itself around my wrists, twisting, pulling tight. I tried to throw it down, but it clung, whispering in voices I couldn't name. "You cannot hide. You are ours now." I stumbled backward, the room bending around me. Shadows stretched, twisting, forming human shapes. Faces, mouths moving in silent screams, eyes black pits, all pressing toward me. I screamed, but my voice came back hollow, layered with hundreds of others, screaming their accusations, their grief, their revenge. I ran through the streets, but reflections appeared everywhere. Shop windows, puddles, mirrors, even the lenses of passing cameras. Every one of them showed peeling, itching skin. Every one of them echoed with the chorus. The wig clung to my shoulder, twisting, alive, whispering. Home offered no refuge. Mirrors in my apartment were portals now. I saw Monica standing behind me in reflections, her smile wider than reality allowed. Her fingers brushed my shoulders, though no one was there. The chorus spoke through her, 100 voices rising together. You will wear our ruin. You will feel our pain. You belong to us. Days and nights blurred. I stopped speaking to others, stopped leaving. The itch never left. The wig moved on its own. The reflections multiplied. I could feel them inside me, beneath my skin, threading through my nerves, coiling around my thoughts. And Monica, ever patient, waits, always waits. One night I caught my reflection smiling at me, a grin that was not mine. It leaned forward, lips cracking, revealing teeth too sharp, eyes black and endless. I touched it, nothing. But the itch, the peeling, the sense of living accusation surged stronger than ever. The wig slithered across my dresser, wrapping itself around a chair leg, moving, whispering, demanding. I know it will happen. I feel it in my bones. The chorus is patient. Monica is patient. And when they push me fully into their world, when my skin bubbles and peels entirely and the wig binds me, there will be no return. Only the chorus, only the voices, only the relentless, infinite judgment of those who were wronged. I am Alyssa Monroe. I am alone. I am hunted. And one day they will finish pushing me in. I was 31 when I finally convinced myself to try dating again. Too many years wasted on men who treated me like a burden, like something to mold or control. I swore the next time I opened the door to someone new, it would be different. That promise carried me on to True Flame, a dating app for people who claim to be done playing games. That's where I matched with Evan Wright. He was 33, a school teacher, the kind of man who smiled in photos without needing to flex. His messages were kind, thoughtful, curious in a way that felt safe. Safe enough that I agreed to meet him. It was October 18th, 2021, a Monday night in Norfolk, Virginia. The rain hadn't stopped all day, a soft but endless drizzle that made the city lights blur into smeared halos. I chose the Shipyard Tavern, a quiet place on 213 Granby Street not far from my apartment. When I walked in, the wood floors creaked under my boots and smelled faintly of mildew, though I told myself it was just the weather. Evan was already there, waving from a corner booth, his brown hair damp, his jacket folded neatly beside him. He stood when I approached. "Kara," he said warmly, "glad you came." For the first half hour, it was everything a first date should be. We talked about our jobs, our favorite music, even the stupid little things like how I still microwave tea instead of using a kettle. He teased, I laughed, and the storm outside beat harder against the windows. The kind of cozy background noise that makes you want to stay tucked indoors forever. But then halfway through our meal, something shifted. A man at the bar kept staring at me, his eyes glassy fixed as if he knew me. His lips moved soundlessly like he was repeating my name. At first, I tried to ignore him. You tell yourself not to be paranoid, that people glance, people stare, especially when you're on a date. But there was something about him that made my stomach tighten. His clothes were wrong somehow, like they hadn't been made in this decade. Faded flannel, frayed at the collar, jeans sagging oddly at the knees. His skin looked grayish in the dim light, the kind of pallor that reminded me of cigarette ash, Evan noticed. "Do you know him?" he asked, lowering his voice, tilting his head toward the bar. No. But even as I said it, a strange uncertainty pulsed through me, because when I looked back, the man's lips had formed a shape I recognized. My name, Kara. I excused myself to the bathroom just to get away from it. The mirror was cracked down the left side, fogged with condensation from the leaky pipe under the sink. I pressed my palms to the edge of the porcelain and told myself I was overreacting. It's just nerves. First dates always made me hyper-aware, like every noise or glance carried hidden meaning. Still, when I returned, the man hadn't moved. Same stool, same glass in front of him, but I realized he hadn't taken a sip. The drink was untouched, the ice melted into pale water. Evan leaned closer. "If he's bothering you, we can go somewhere else." I shook my head quickly. I didn't want to be the paranoid girl who ruined her own date. "It's fine, really." But it wasn't fine. The night pressed on and the storm outside grew harsher. At one point, thunder cracked so loudly that the window panes rattled. That was when I noticed the bar had mostly emptied. A couple of stragglers paid their tabs, the bartender yawned and wiped down glasses. But the man stayed. His lips kept moving, whispering something I couldn't hear. My name again, I thought. Over and over. I tried to laugh it off, tell myself it was just some drunk. But his eyes, flat and shining, never left mine. By the time we decided to leave, the tavern was nearly deserted. I felt relief in the thought of open air, of rain on my face, of distance between me and that stare. Evan offered to walk me to his car, and I accepted instantly. The streets outside were slick with puddles, reflecting neon signs in jagged streaks. The rain fell in sheets now, slanting sideways with the wind. We pulled up our hoods, hurried along, shoes splashing in shallow water. But the man was waiting. He leaned against the tavern's brick wall, motionless as though he'd stepped outside before us and simply stopped. His eyes locked onto mine again, unblinking, and then his voice breaking the rhythm of the storm. "You can't leave us, Kara, not again." The words cut through me like a blade. My stomach dropped. I had never seen him before in my life. And yet the certainty in his voice, the way he said us, as though there were more, as though I belonged to something I didn't remember, made my chest seize. Evan stepped forward, protective. "Back off, man." But the man only grinned. His teeth were gray, uneven like stones from a riverbed. His fingers twitched at his sides, curling and uncurling like broken branches, and from the shadows others emerged. 5, maybe 6 of them. Silent at first, then moving closer. Their clothes mismatched, faded, wrong in a way I couldn't define. They looked drenched, but the rain didn't seem to soak them. It slid off as if the water passed through. Their mouths moved in unison, whispering, "My name, Kara, Kara, Kara." My heart thrashed. I grabbed Evan's sleeve. "Get in the car now, we barely made it." Fingers smacked against the windows as Evan gunned the engine, wipers screeching across glass, headlights struggling against the rain. The figures swarmed the car, faces pressed to the glass, mouths opening wider than humanly possible. I swear I saw their tongues lolling, black with rainwater spilling down their chins like ink. Evan drove, fast, too fast, but the storm swallowed the road. And still, in the blur of raindrops and neon, I thought I saw one of them running beside us, keeping pace, effortless. Its face turned toward mine, lips still moving. We didn't speak until we reached my apartment. The street lamps flickered overhead, buzzing faintly in the storm. Evan's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. When he finally looked at me, his face was pale, almost sick. "I don't know what the hell that was," he whispered. "But I can't. I can't be part of it." I begged him to come inside, to not leave me alone, but he shook his head, his eyes darting to the rearview mirror like he expected someone to be there. Then he drove off, taillights bleeding into the storm. I never heard from him again. Not a call, not a message. His true flame profile disappeared within days. And yet every night since, when it rains, I hear them outside my window. Those voices calling my name, promising I'll never escape. The truth I can't admit to anyone is this. I think they're right. I don't remember them, but they remember me. The morning after should have brought clarity. That was what I told myself as I lay awake in bed, watching the rain's faint shimmer through the blinds. Morning light has a way of softening the edges of the night before. But when my alarm went off and I stumbled to the kitchen, the unease clung to me like damp clothes that refused to dry. I tried to do normal things. Brew coffee, check emails, scroll headlines, anything to prove I was still tethered to the ordinary world. But every reflection I passed, a window, the dark gloss of the microwave, made me flinch. I half expected to see someone standing behind me, lips moving soundlessly. At work, I couldn't focus. I'm a paralegal for a small firm downtown, which means most of my day is buried in paperwork. Normally, I can drown myself in contracts, highlight clauses until the text blurs, but my brain snagged on that night, on Evan's face when he said he couldn't be part of it. That look of recognition almost, though he didn't know them any more than I did. By lunchtime, I caved and tried calling him. Straight to voicemail. Later, when I searched True Flame, his profile was gone. Not inactive, deleted. Like he'd never been there at all. That night, it rained again. I live on the 4th floor of a brick building just off Granby. Old pipes, humming radiators, thin walls. When storms hit, the whole place feels alive, shuddering like it wants to collapse. I sat curled on the couch with a blanket, TV on for background noise. Some forgettable crime drama, voices babbling to distract me, and then I heard it. Faint. Almost lost in the patter of rain against glass. But steady, rhythmic, Kara, my name. I muted the TV. Sat perfectly still. The building groaned, water rushed through gutters, but underneath, there it was again. A chorus whispered. My skin prickled as I forced myself to the window. The street below was nearly empty, puddles shimmering under the glow of the street lamp. But at the far end, near the alley, I saw them, 6, maybe 7, standing together in the rain. Motionless, their heads tilted back, mouths open. The sound didn't travel from their lips, it was inside my head. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the coffee table. When I looked again, the street was empty. For hours after, I paced my apartment, blinds drawn, lights on. I told myself I was overtired, imagining things. Stress and bad weather, that's all. But deep down, I knew. They had found me. The next few days blurred. At work, I mixed up case files, called clients by the wrong names. I stopped going to lunch with coworkers, stopped answering texts. Everything felt thin, like reality had stretched too far and would tear at any moment. On Thursday night, I dreamt of water, dark, endless water, with faces floating just beneath the surface. Their mouths moved in silence, hair drifting like seaweed. When I woke, my pillow was damp. From sweat, I told myself. Only sweat. Friday evening, the storm returned in full force. Sheets of rain, windows rattling so hard I thought the glass would shatter. I tried wine, tried music, tried anything to drown the fear clawing at me. But at exactly midnight, the voices rose again. Kara, Kara, come back to us. This time, the sound came not from outside, but inside the apartment. I spun, heart slamming, and caught sight of them, reflected in the sliding glass of the balcony door. 6, maybe more, crammed into that faint shimmer of reflection. Faces pale, eyes too wide, mouths working in perfect unison. But when I turned, the balcony was empty. Only rain and black sky. I locked myself in the bathroom, curled on the floor until dawn. By Saturday, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know who they were, what they wanted, why they thought I belonged to them. I went back to the Shipyard Tavern. The bartender remembered me. His eyes narrowed when I asked about the man at the bar that night. What man? Gray flannel, dark hair. Sat near the end, didn't touch his drink. He frowned. No one like that here. Just you two lovebirds. Me and Evan, I corrected. But at the name, his expression turned blank. Who? My stomach lurched. The man I was with. Brown hair, teacher. He was here. The bartender shook his head slowly. You came in alone. I left before he could say more. The rain had stopped, but the air felt heavy, close. As I walked down Granby, every window seemed to hold eyes. Every puddle rippled, though there was no wind. That night, the dreams worsened. Not just water now, but halls I didn't recognize. Long corridors of rotting wood, doors hanging open to black rooms. The faces waited inside, whispering, calling, and when I woke, I swore I smelled mildew, the same as the tavern floorboards. By Sunday, I was unraveling. I stopped going to work, stopped answering calls from my sister. I couldn't explain what was happening. How do you tell someone you're being hunted by people you don't remember? That evening, the storm came again, like it was waiting. I sat on the bed, too exhausted to move, when the whispers rose. Louder now, urgent. The window fogged, though the room was cold. And in that condensation, words formed. Welcome back, I screamed. Backed into the closet, slammed the door. But even there, in the dark, their voices seeped through. You left us. You belong. You always belonged. I pressed my palms to my ears until they ached. Rocked myself until my throat was raw from begging them to stop. At some point, I must have passed out. When I opened my eyes, it was dawn. But something had changed. The apartment smelled of earth, damp and rotting, like a forest after rain. My carpet was wet. Bare footprints led from the balcony to the foot of my bed. They had been inside. I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending I don't know them. Because pieces are surfacing, fragments, flashes of water, of hands gripping mine, of promises whispered in the dark. A ritual, maybe. Something binding, and I'm terrified because deep down, part of me longs to remember. Now every time it rains, they gather outside. I see them in glass, in water, in the corner of my vision. Their mouths open, their voices endless. They don't want to hurt me. Not exactly. They want me back, and the worst part is, sometimes in the middle of the night, when the storm is heaviest and their voices are sweetest, I want to go because maybe they're right. Maybe I don't remember them. But they remember me. September 14th, 1998. The night air in Savannah, Georgia pressed down heavy and wet, the kind of humidity that clung to your lungs. My name is Clara Hastings, 22, and I was still trying to outrun the mistakes of my past, chief among them, a shattered engagement and the dull ache of returning to live with my aunt above her antiques shop at 412 Whitaker Street. You tell yourself you'll never go back to the places where you failed. You tell yourself the walls don't remember, that wood and plaster aren't repositories of shame. But Savannah doesn't forgive. It breathes, it holds, it whispers. Every cobblestone felt like an accusation when I dragged my suitcase up those narrow stairs. I told myself I wasn't ready for another relationship, that I needed time, solitude, sobriety of the heart. But loneliness is a sly creature. It makes bargains with your better judgment. It tells you to laugh when you don't want to. It tells you to say yes when you mean no. That's why when Ethan Mercer, a graduate student with a lopsided grin, always hovering near the philosophy section of the shop, asked me out, I said yes. Marta, my coworker, leaned against the counter before I left, chewing her gum with a smirk. Wear red, Clara. Men don't remember faces, they remember red. I laughed, pretended it rolled off me, but my palms were slick as I buttoned the crimson blouse in my bedroom. In the mirror, I looked like someone I used to know. The girl who smiled easily, who didn't double-check locks, who hadn't learned to fear reflections. But that night the mirror didn't just show me. For a split second, no more than the blink of an eye, I saw my reflection's lips move, forming a word. Come. I spun around. Nothing. Just the rattle of cicadas outside the window and the faint smell of polish from the shop downstairs. When Ethan's car pulled up, a Buick that coughed smoke like an asthmatic, the sky was bruised purple. Spanish moss hung in limp swathes from the live oaks, gray fingers brushing the hood. He looked at me strangely when I slid inside, as though he already knew me, knew too much. We drove past Forsyth Park, the fountain lit up in sickly green, and I noticed Ethan glancing again and again at the rearview mirror. Is something wrong? I asked. He smiled too quickly. Just thought I saw someone following. I turned, but the street behind us was empty. Just lamplight bleeding across cobblestones. Still, the glass in the side mirror shimmered like oil. I could swear for a heartbeat there was a face pressed against the surface, not mine, not his, but hollow-eyed, grinning. I bit down on a nervous laugh. If I spoke it aloud, it would become real. The restaurant, Leopold's on Broughton Street, was a pocket of brightness. Neon buzzed in the windows, chatter rolled across tiled walls, and the clink of glasses steadied my nerves. We ordered sandwiches, ice cream, and for a little while, I allowed myself to believe in ordinary things again. Then the lights flickered. Above the counter hung a wide mirror, its surface rippling like disturbed water. I looked up and saw myself, only not myself. Older, gaunter, eyes blackened, smiling in a way my mouth wasn't moving. The spoon clattered from my hand. Ethan's fingers closed around my wrist harder than necessary. Clara, he whispered, his voice tight. Don't look at the mirrors. They notice when you do. No one else in the restaurant reacted. They didn't notice the way the walls seemed to lean closer, or how the ceiling sagged like damp canvas. I pulled my hand away. What's going on? His jaw clenched. You shouldn't have worn red. It makes them hungry. Before I could ask, every window shattered at once. But there was no sound, no shattering crash, only a sudden sucking silence as though the air had been inhaled. Shadows spilled inside, taller than men, faceless but smiling with invisible teeth. Their forms flickered as though they were only half present. And I realized with a sick twist of my stomach that each shadow had a faint shimmer, a glint of glass at its core, like they were made of broken reflections. The fragments of people caught and devoured. Ethan yanked me toward the kitchen. My lungs burned. My ears filled with whispers. "We've been waiting, Clara. You promised us once before." I tore free, shoving past Cooks through the back door into the alley. The cicadas screamed, but the street itself was too empty, rehearsed in its silence. My heels snapped, so I ran barefoot until I collapsed against my aunt's shop door, skin scraped, chest heaving. For weeks afterward, I avoided every pane of glass. I covered mirrors with sheets. Marta teased me, called it superstition, heartbreak, eccentricity, but I knew what I'd seen. The reflection didn't just watch anymore. At night, when I brushed my teeth, the mirror above the sink quivered, rippling outward. My reflection would lean closer, lips moving in frantic whispers I couldn't hear. Sometimes her eyes widened in panic as if she were trapped, warning me. Other times she smiled with hunger. One night, when I stared too long, her hand rose and pressed against the glass. The condensation spread outward, fogging my side of the mirror until letters formed in dripping streaks. "Soon," I screamed, covered the mirror with a towel, and slept on the floor. Ethan didn't come by the shop again. I tried to tell myself he was a coward, ashamed of the scene at the restaurant. But at night I heard whispers outside my window. Not voices exactly, more like the echo of my own thoughts repeated back in a tone that wasn't mine. Sometimes I woke to find condensation streaked across the inside of the glass, shaped like handprints. Sometimes I saw myself smile before I did. And once, God help me, I woke to find my reflection wearing the red blouse while I lay in a white nightgown. She raised a finger to her lips and mouthed, "Shh." The antiques shop grew oppressive. Every mirror, every polished surface seemed to shift when I passed. My aunt, practical and sharp-eyed, started to notice my behavior. "Clara, why are you draping sheets over the display cases? Customers don't want to buy things they can't see." I mumbled excuses, said the glass was dusty. But the truth was, the longer I worked there, the more I sensed them. The taken ones, the faceless shadows. They flickered at the edges of the glass as if waiting for me to blink. I started to believe they were people once. People like me. Drawn too close, looked too long, devoured until nothing remained but reflection. One night, when the shop was closed, I dared peel back a sheet and look into the tall French mirror. Dozens of faces crowded behind my reflection, their mouths open in soundless screams. And she, my double, my gaunt-eyed twin, smiled, stepping just a fraction closer. That was when I understood. These shadows weren't random. They were collectors. My reflection wasn't passive. She was part of them, and they were hungry. That night I dreamed of glass. Endless halls of it, mirror upon mirror, all tilted so I could see myself 1,000 times. Except they weren't me. Each reflection moved a fraction slower, a fraction faster, mouths opening in different words, some laughing, some sobbing, and in the center of them all, she stood, the version of me with rotted eyes wearing the red blouse. When she smiled, the glass cracked outward like a spider web. I woke drenched in sweat, the bedsheet twisted around my ankles. The mirror across the room was covered, but the towel had slipped just enough for a sliver of glass to peek out. I swear I saw a flicker of movement. I couldn't keep living like this. I needed answers. The next day I tracked Ethan down. Marta had heard he worked nights in the library at the university. I lingered until the fluorescent lights flickered overhead and caught him shelving books. His shoulders hunched as if weighed down by things he couldn't put into words. When he saw me, his face paled. "Clara, you shouldn't be here. Why didn't you come back?" I demanded. My voice cracked on the last word. He looked around, checking the corners as though the shadows might be listening. "Because they're watching you now. And if I stay near, they'll take me too." I shook my head. "You're not making sense." He lowered his voice. "Mirrors aren't reflections, Clara. They're doors. Thin ones. They open for hunger. The things you see, they used to be people. They look too long or too often. Once you catch their attention, you're theirs." I thought of the faces pressed behind mine, screaming in silence. My stomach knotted. Then what am I supposed to do? His mouth twisted. "Don't feed them. Don't give them recognition. Cover every surface. Never wear red." I wanted to laugh at the absurdity, but I remembered the way every window had shattered without a sound, the way my reflection's hand had fogged the mirror with the word soon. "Is there a way to stop them?" I whispered. Ethan hesitated. "No one ever stops them. They just delay." He walked away, leaving me shaking in the humming silence of the library. Delay. That word gnawed at me. I doubled down, sheets over every mirror, polished surfaces turned to the wall. I learned the angles of every reflective spot in the shop, navigating by instinct so I never risked a glance, but still, the attacks grew bolder. When I passed the kitchen window one morning, steam rising from my coffee, I caught sight of her, my reflection already waiting, mouthing words. This time I could almost hear them, muffled but insistent. Trade places. I slammed the curtain shut. That night, my reflection didn't just watch. She showed me things I shouldn't see. In the streaked glass of the bathroom mirror, I saw the shop downstairs, though I was standing upstairs. I saw Marta dusting shelves, humming, and then I saw a shadow rise up behind her, faceless, stretching wide. I ran down, heart thundering, but the shop was empty. Marta had gone home hours earlier. The mirror had lied or told a future I didn't want. The mythology unfolded in fragments like pieces of overheard conversations. My aunt told me old Savannah stories of mirrors covered when someone died, to stop the soul from being trapped. She said in hushed tones that her grandmother believed the glass could keep a person forever, half alive. One evening, I asked her casually if she'd ever heard of people being taken. She stiffened. "Clara, don't play with those things. We cover mirrors for a reason. If you see something in them, you shouldn't. It's not meant for you." Her words sank like stones in my chest. Not meant for me. But the shadows kept whispering my name. By October, the reflections had become a constant. Sometimes they moved before I did, lagging or leaping ahead. Sometimes they screamed silently, faces distorting against the glass. The worst was the night I found myself standing at my bedroom mirror at 3 a.m, though I didn't remember walking there. My reflection smiled first. She lifted her hand, slow, deliberate, and placed her palm against the glass. Against my will, my hand rose to meet hers. The cold of the glass burned. Then I felt it. Pressure, like something pressing back, trying to pull me in. I tore away, knocking over the lamp. The room flooded with light, and the mirror was just a mirror again, except for the faint imprint of a handprint inside the glass, too deep to wipe away. I started dreaming of the others. The shadows. Each dream was darker, the figures closer. I began to recognize them. Faces from old photographs in the shop, faded portraits of strangers long dead. They were the devoured, the ones who had been swallowed. In the dreams, they whispered, "We are glass now. We are waiting. Come feed us." I woke gasping, throat raw, as if I'd been screaming for hours. The final breaking point came on a stormy night in November. Lightning cracked across the sky, throwing the city into sharp relief. I sat in my room with every reflective surface covered, heart racing with every boom. But no matter how I hid them, the mirrors found me. The storm window rattled, and in its reflection I saw her again, my double. She didn't mimic me this time. She acted on her own, pacing the room in the glass while I sat frozen. She stopped, turned, and held up the red blouse. She slid it over her shoulders, buttoning it slow, deliberate. Then she smiled. I couldn't move. The air felt thick, pressing me into the bed. And then she blinked. But it wasn't me who blinked second. It was her. The lightning flared, and for a split second she stood not just in the glass but in the room itself, her shadow falling across me. I shut my eyes. When I opened them, the window was empty. The blouse hung untouched in the closet. But I knew she was closer now. I live in constant dread. I cover every mirror, but glass is everywhere. Windows, water, polished floors. People laugh, call me eccentric, damaged, superstitious. They don't understand the hunger. They don't hear the voices calling from the other side. Every time I walk past a darkened window, she's there, patient, rotted eyes glittering. Every time, she's a little more free. And when I finally fail, when my gaze lingers too long, when my eyelids falter, she will step out, button the red blouse, and take my place. Because tonight, as I sit writing this, I watched her do something I didn't. She smiled and she blinked first. It began on a damp, wind-slick night in early spring, the kind of Florida evening when the Gulf air feels heavy enough to drink. My name is Camille Hart, I'm 27, and until March 18, 2024, I worked the late desk at Clearwater Family Medical, 2045 Drew Street, Clearwater, Florida, a job as routine and beige as the walls around it. Loneliness had settled over me like a second atmosphere. It was more than an emotion. It was a pressure system. Some nights, the quiet in my apartment thickened until I could swear I heard a low vibration under the air conditioner, like a distant transformer humming through the bones of the building. When my coworker Tasha leaned across the reception counter one slow Thursday and said, "You need to meet my cousin Nolan," I almost laughed. She kept talking, words spilling like a practiced pitch. He's old school. Opens doors, pays for dinner, chivalry, no apps, no games. Just a real date. I told her I wasn't looking, but she waved the protest away. Curiosity isn't a crime. Just one dinner. The truth was I craved any break from the endless static of my days. So I said yes. Saturday, March 23rd, arrived under bruised clouds that smelled of wet asphalt and sea salt. My roommate Claire leaned in the bathroom doorway as I fought a curling iron that refused to cooperate. "Blind dates are just true crime waiting to happen," she said, half smile shadowing her face. "Thanks for the pep talk." "I'm serious. Remember that podcast about the guy, Claire," I cut in. "He's Tasha's cousin. Harmless." She didn't argue, just watched me for a beat too long before shrugging and walking away. Her silence felt heavier than her words. Nolan arrived at 7:15 sharp, texting that he was outside. Through the blinds, I saw a black Toyota Tacoma polished to a mirror shine. He stood beside it, tall and neat in a navy button-down and dark jeans, every detail carefully placed. His smile was warm enough to make me forget for a heartbeat. The warning weight of Claire's silence. Dinner was at a seafood shack near Clearwater Beach, the kind of locals-only spot with laminated menus and a permanent smell of fried grouper. We shared shrimp platters and a bucket of beer. Conversation flowed with easy precision. Childhood scars, favorite stretches of sand, his father teaching him to fish, my clumsy paddleboarding attempts. He listened with an attention so exact it felt staged, like he was memorizing me. Yet unease arrived in small surgical increments. The candle between us flared and dimmed with a rhythm that matched the faint vibration under the floor. My water tasted faintly metallic, leaving a slick numbness on my tongue. When I excused myself to the restroom, the hallway lights flickered once, twice. In that blink of shadow, I thought I saw Nolan's reflection already in the mirror behind me, though logic said he was still at the table. Back at my seat, he tilted his head, voice soft enough to be mistaken for care. "You shouldn't doubt what's real." I forced a laugh, but the words landed like cold rain. After dinner, he suggested a walk on the beach. The tide hissed across the sand, the wind sharp with brine. We spoke of trivial things until his voice shifted mid-sentence. "My dad believed discipline kept a family strong," he said, eyes fixed on the horizon's black seam. "Sometimes a reminder is necessary." "Hitting isn't love," I said before I could stop myself. His smile thinned. "Not hitting, guiding." The air cooled. A sudden drop like the breath before a storm. Then the hum rose from the sand. It started as a deep engine drone. Steady and low, but with each beat of my heart it sharpened. Higher when fear spiked. Lower when I forced a breath. The sound vibrated through my soles into my ribs as if the beach itself were tuning to my pulse. Nolan stepped closer, pupils swallowing moonlight. "Do you feel that?" he whispered. "It listens when we speak the truth." His shadow stretched long across the sand, edges fraying like smoke. I backed away, but the ground softened to a cold, sucking pull. Nolan's hand clamped around my wrist, ice-cold, fingers unyielding. Panic sent the hum screeching into a high electric whine that made my teeth ache. A woman's voice cut the night. "Hey, you okay?" Flashlights sliced through darkness. A young couple, Brian and Marisol, they later told me, ran toward us. The instant their light hit us, Nolan's grip vanished. The hum dropped to silence. He stepped back, eyes flat, and then simply wasn't there. No retreating footsteps, no Tacoma in the lot, only the fading hiss of tide. Brian wrapped his jacket around my shoulders while Marisol dialed 911. The police combed the beach but found nothing. No man, no truck, not even a reservation under his name. My phone still held our texts until I opened them. The thread was blank, as if we'd never spoken. Days passed. The bruise on my wrist deepened to a purplish ring, proof I clung to like a lifeline. But at night the hum returned, subtle as breath, rising and falling with my thoughts. When despair crept in, it swelled until picture frames rattled. When I forced calm, it sank to a faint purr. The clinic felt wrong when I returned to work. Lights flickered in patterns that matched my heartbeat. Files I'd alphabetized perfectly appeared out of order. Patients called asking about appointments I'd never booked. Tasha swore she'd never set me up with anyone. Cousin Nolan? Camille, I don't have a cousin by that name. Her confusion was too clean to fake. Sleep unraveled next. I woke each night at 3:11 a.m., the hum thrumming through the walls like a swarm of cicadas buried in concrete. My phone would light with a single notification. Don't doubt what's real. No number, no history. By morning, nothing remained. Desperate for proof, I started recording. Audio files captured only the hiss of my breath. Video showed a perfectly still room while I swore the picture frames trembled. And then came Eli. He appeared one rain-washed evening as I left the clinic. A tall man in a soaked denim jacket holding an umbrella he offered with a tentative smile. He'd overheard me fumbling for my keys and introduced himself as a friend of Marisol's brother, the couple from the beach. They said you went through something scary, he said gently. I'm a social worker. I can listen if you want. Something in his voice, steady, unhurried, felt like a rope thrown across a widening gulf. We sat in a late-night diner and talked until the rain stopped. He didn't flinch when I described the hum or the disappearing texts. He only asked careful questions. When does it get louder? What triggers it? When I'm alone, I admitted. Saying it out loud crystallized a pattern I'd been avoiding. The hum always surged when no one else was near. When Claire was home, it sank to a faint vibration. When I stepped into a crowded street, it vanished entirely. Eli nodded. Then don't be alone, he said simply. For the first time in weeks, hope flickered. Maybe this was just trauma, a wound of the mind that company could soothe. I clung to that thought as if it were oxygen, but hope is a fragile thing, easily bent. Eli kept his promise. For the next week, he texted every morning and evening, small anchors in a restless sea. Breakfast? Made it home? Sleep okay? His presence thinned the shadows in my apartment. When he stayed late, the hum shrank to a soft bass note, more felt than heard, like the muted throb of a distant subwoofer. But it never disappeared. It waited. One night we met for coffee near the pier. The shop was mostly empty, the windows black mirrors reflecting our small circle of light. I told him about the missing texts, the bruised wrist, the reflection in the restaurant mirror. He listened, elbows resting on the table, brow furrowed with genuine concern. Sounds like it feeds on isolation, he said after a long pause. The phrasing startled me. Feeds. Not thrives, not grows, feeds. Like it needs you to be alone to reach you, he added, lowering his voice. That would explain why it retreats when you're with others. A gust of wind rattled the glass and the hum flickered through the floor like a shiver of low-voltage electricity. I flinched. Eli reached across the table, his hand warm over mine. Stay around, people. Don't give it room. For a few fragile days, I almost believed I could starve it out. I filled my schedule with double shifts and movie nights with Claire. The hum weakened, flattening to a dull murmur. My phone stayed clean. Then, late Wednesday, Claire got a call about her grandmother's stroke. She packed a bag and left for Tallahassee before sunrise. The apartment exhaled emptiness the moment the door latched behind her. By evening, the hum returned, bold and layered. It no longer sounded like a single drone, but a braided chord, one note like a far-off engine, another like a swarm of insects, and beneath it a faint melodic thread that almost formed words. My fear sharpened its pitch into a thin metallic whine that made the windows quiver. I called Eli, straight to voicemail. I texted. No reply. The lights flickered 3 times, my heartbeat counting them, and then my phone lit with a message. Truth is the only door. The letters crawled across the screen as if written from inside the glass. Who are you? I typed with shaking fingers. No response, only the hum swelling until the drywall vibrated. I fled the apartment and drove aimlessly along Gulf to Bay Boulevard, searching for people, noise, anything. But the streets were slick and empty. Storefronts shuddered against an approaching storm. With each red light, the hum adjusted, dipping when I forced calm, climbing when panic spiked. It was not following me. It was inside me, matching each breath, each thought. I ended up at the Pier 60 parking lot, rain needling the windshield. Through the blur, I saw a familiar shape leaning against a lamppost. Nolan. He looked exactly as he had that first night. Same navy shirt, same perfect stillness. Raindrops struck his shoulders and rolled off without soaking the fabric. When I blinked, he was suddenly at my window. The lock clicked open on its own. Cold air and the hum flooded in. "You tried to hide," he said softly, not accusing, almost tender, but loneliness always tells the truth. His eyes gleamed with a wet, depthless black. "You can't starve what you carry inside." I threw the car into reverse, tires squealing across wet asphalt. Nolan didn't move. Instead, the hum leapt an octave so high it felt like needles under my skin. My vision blurred. Streetlights smeared into comets of pale fire. A sudden pounding on the passenger window snapped the spell. Eli rain plastered his hair, his eyes wide. "Camille, unlock it!" I fumbled for the latch. He slid inside, dripping water and adrenaline. "Drive," he said. I obeyed, tires spitting water. In the mirror, Nolan still stood beneath the lamppost, but his face was turned upward now, as if listening to some distant music. We drove for miles, ending at a deserted rest area off US 19. The rain softened to a mist, a damp hush over the pines. Eli finally spoke. "It followed you because it knows what you are," he said. The wording chilled me. "What I am? Lonely," he answered, eyes steady. "It comes to those who ache for connection. It offers what you fear you'll never find." The hum pulsed through the floorboards, deep and resonant. "You've heard it change when you feel something," he continued. "Fear raises the pitch. Calm lowers it. But truth makes it open." "Open what?" My voice cracked. He leaned closer. "The door." Before I could speak, a vibration rippled through the rest area like a slow earthquake. The air thickened, bending the headlights into wavering columns of liquid light. Out of that shimmer stepped Nolan. He smiled. Not a grin, but a soft, sorrowful curve of lips that felt more human than anything before. "This isn't about fear," he said, voice carrying over the rising hum. "It's about what you asked for in the dark. I only answer." The space around him bent, subtle at first, a gentle warping like heat over asphalt, then more violent, folding trees and asphalt into a swirling corridor of shadow. Behind him lay not night but a dim gray expanse that smelled of salt and rain, a world shaped like memory. Eli squeezed my hand. "Stay with me," he whispered, but his voice sounded distant, muffled under the roar of the hum. Nolan extended a hand toward me. "You wanted someone who never leaves," he said. "I can be that. Step forward. The hum will quiet. The ache will end," my heart hammered. The air tasted of ozone and iron. Behind Nolan, the gray world pulsed like a living wound. Eli's grip tightened. "He can't touch you if you choose to stay," he urged. "But you have to choose." The hum rose, not a single pitch now, but an entire choir. Deep bass like a cathedral organ, insect buzz layered with a faint melody, almost human, almost pleading. It vibrated through my skull until thought itself frayed. I saw flashes of my life. Empty dinners, unanswered texts, the way I pressed my phone to my chest just to feel a phantom heartbeat. Loneliness raw and unvarnished. Nolan was not wrong. I had asked in unguarded midnight whispers for someone who would stay. Truth is the only door. The phrase bloomed inside the hum, each word a separate tone. Truth. Only. Door. The truth was that part of me wanted the quiet he promised. A life without waiting, without absence. To step into that gray world was to end the ache. But another truth flickered. Fragile but insistent. Connection is real only when it can be lost. I turned to Eli. His eyes held something I hadn't seen before, a faint sheen of sorrow, as if he already knew my decision. "You're real," I whispered, though even as I said it I wondered, was he? Or just another mask the entity wore to offer me a choice? A false hope designed to make the final betrayal more exquisite? I tightened my grip on his hand anyway and stepped back. The hum faltered, a sudden dip like a record losing power. Nolan's expression didn't darken. It softened, almost paternal. "Truth closes doors as well," he said gently. "But they never stay closed." The gray corridor folded in on itself like paper burning from the edges. The hum collapsed into silence so abrupt my ears rang. When the world steadied, Nolan was gone. Eli exhaled shakily and pulled me into a brief, grounding embrace. We drove until dawn without speaking. In the days that followed, the hum retreated to a faint vibration I could almost dismiss as traffic or distant machinery. Eli checked on me, bringing coffee, sitting through long silences. Yet unease lingered. Sometimes when he looked away, the reflection in a window would catch his face, and for an instant, the eyes staring back held Nolan's infinite black. I never confronted him. Maybe I feared the answer, or maybe I already knew that whatever Eli was, friend, stranger, or something older, his presence kept the hum at bay. One evening, we walked along the shore as the sunset bled into the Gulf. The tide hissed like a slow inhale. Eli paused, gaze fixed on the horizon. "You'll hear it again," he said quietly. "When you're ready." The wind carried a faint vibration across the sand. Not loud, just enough to stir the hairs on my arms. A promise, not a threat. I looked out at the endless water and felt the familiar ache of solitude rising like a tide. The hum answered, subtle and warm, waiting for me to speak the next truth. I never thought a library could turn on me. When I was younger, the library was my sanctuary. Air-conditioned summers between stacks, the quiet rustle of pages filling the spaces where conversation should have been. My parents worked long hours. I kept myself company with books. By the time I was 26 and employed here, behind the reference desk at the Brookfield Public Library, the building felt like an extension of my skin. I could walk its aisles in the dark without a light and never stumble. But lately the place has felt different. The fluorescent lights hum a little too loudly, their pitch shifting in ways I can't quite predict. Books I'm certain I shelved yesterday reappear at odd angles, spines jutting as if they're craning toward me. Sometimes when I'm alone, the smell of old stone drifts through the air vents, a damp mineral tang like the underside of a basement. There's no stone here. The library has poured concrete, steel, glass. Yet that smell hangs, and every time my stomach knots. The first time I saw Victor, he seemed harmless. He was tall, mid-40s maybe, though his posture was fluid in a way that made age hard to pin down. His suit was outdated, heavy wool that didn't fit the season, and his shoes looked scuffed from long walks. He asked me about archival records, his voice low and deliberate, each syllable touched with an accent I couldn't place. When he smiled, his teeth were white but too even, as if copied from an old photograph. And when his hand brushed mine across the desk, I noticed his fingernails, cracked, rough, with a texture like weathered stone. I pulled my hand back too quickly. He noticed. His smile widened, but not kindly. That evening, as I locked up, I caught sight of him again, standing at the end of the farthest aisle, where the tall shelves meet the old oak doors. The library was supposed to be empty. The security lights had dimmed. The glass front reflected only my shape, but there he was, half in shadow, one hand resting on the spines of books. I blinked. He was gone. I told myself exhaustion was playing tricks. I'd been covering late shifts for a sick coworker. Still, as I stepped out into the night air, I swore the hum of the fluorescents followed me outside, buzzing faintly even after the doors closed. Over the next week, Victor came back. Always in the evenings, always with questions about obscure architectural records, blueprints of Brookfield's oldest buildings, newspaper clippings about the city's founding. He lingered too long, asked me to help him search. At first, I was polite. A patron's a patron, but something about him prickled my skin. His eyes never seemed to rest in one place. When he read, his gaze flicked too quickly across the page, as if he were remembering rather than learning. One night, when he reached to take a book from me, his fingers grazed mine again. For a fraction of a second, I swear I felt grit crumble against my skin, like sandstone eroding at my touch. I excused myself to the staff room, locked the door, and scrubbed my hands raw under the faucet. My reflection in the mirror looked pale, strained, but I forced a smile when a coworker knocked to ask if I was okay. The library began changing. Books appeared out of order, always in the sections Victor frequented. Dewey Decimal numbers rearranged themselves. Once, as I reshelved, I noticed the call numbers lined up vertically to spell Erin. My name clear as day. I froze. No one else was nearby. The rows stretched silent. When I blinked, the letters were gone, just ordinary numbers again. The hum of the overhead lights deepened, low and throbbing. My head swam with nausea, like the whole building was tuning itself to a frequency my body couldn't resist. Told myself I was imagining. It's stress, fatigue, but the rational explanations were wearing thin. It escalated the night of the storm. The Rain hammered the library's glass front, streaking neon reflections into long, trembling lines. The wind pressed against the doors until they shuddered. I was alone, closing up, when the fluorescence above the reference desk flickered, then steadied. The hum shifted pitch, higher, insistent. From the corner of my eye, I saw books sliding from the shelves. Not tumbling, sliding one after another, forming a neat row on the carpet. My legs locked, the spines faced upward. The titles spelled nothing, but the call numbers aligned in columns. Digits clicking into place like tumblers of a lock. 2, 1, then another row. 8, 6, 4, then 3, 1, 9 numbers, stacked and repeating. I knew without knowing that they meant something. Something I wasn't supposed to see. A voice murmured my name. I turned. Victor stood at the far end of the aisle. Rain dripping from his suit, though he'd never passed through the door. His hand rested on the shelf, nails cracked like limestone. He smiled. "You've always belonged here," he said softly. His accent thickened, heavy with age. "Stone remembers. Buildings remember. And you carry their memory well." I stumbled back, knocking over a cart. Books clattered, echoing too loud, like the building itself was amplifying the sound. "Stay away from me," I managed. But he only tilted his head, like a parent humoring a child. The next day, I nearly convinced myself it hadn't happened. I arrived early, checked the aisle where the books had arranged themselves. Everything was normal. Still, I couldn't shake the feel of his words. Stone remembers. That phrase tangled in my brain like ivy, wrapping tighter every time I tried to ignore it. And then, a sliver of hope arrived. His name was Daniel, an old friend from high school back in town after years away. He appeared at the reference desk one afternoon, sheepish smile asking if I remembered him. I did. We'd been in drama club together, and I'd nursed a quiet crush I never acted on. He was warm, ordinary in the best way. We talked for nearly an hour, catching up. He asked about my life, my job, and for once I felt the library brighten. The hum of the lights softened. Even the smell of stone faded. When he offered to grab coffee later that week, I agreed too quickly, desperate for someone real. That night, the whispers returned. I woke at 3 a.m. to the sound of paper rustling. My apartment was still, but in the corner my bookshelf stood ajar, books splayed on the floor. I hadn't left them that way. One book lay open, its pages fluttering though no breeze stirred. The text was my handwriting, my old journals copied word for word. Except I'd never written them into that book. The pages spelled one sentence across the lines. Impossible but clear, don't trust him. I slammed the book shut, heart pounding. Daniel's face flashed in my mind, his easy smile. His offer of coffee, don't trust him. I wanted to throw the book away, burn it, but my hands wouldn't let go. The fluorescent hum rose faintly, impossibly, from the apartment ceiling. I didn't sleep. The next day, I dragged myself through work, eyes gritty, nerves frayed. When Daniel texted to confirm our coffee, my fingers hovered above the keyboard. I wanted to say yes. I wanted the ordinary, the safe. But the memory of that sentence clawed at me. Before I could reply, Victor appeared again. Broad daylight in the genealogy section, flipping through brittle newspapers like he belonged. He looked up, smiled with stone-cracked nails resting against yellowed pages. "You've seen it, haven't you?" he asked. His voice was gentle, intimate. "The books tell you the truth. They always do." I backed away, throat dry. His eyes gleamed, reflecting light wrong, as if the fluorescence bent toward him. "This city is carved from memory. Every building, every monument. They chose you because you listen. You see, you'll carry us forward." I ran. That evening, Daniel waited at the cafe, waving when I entered. Normal, warm, human. I told myself the warning had been a hallucination. My mind was fraying under stress. We talked. He laughed. I laughed. For the first time in weeks, my shoulders unknotted. Then, as he reached across the table, his hand brushed mine. His nails looked ordinary, smooth and clean, except just one had the faintest crack. A line like weathered stone. I yanked my hand back. My mug toppled, coffee spilling across the table. Daniel's smile faltered. "Aaron, what's wrong?" Behind him, outside the cafe window, the street lamp flickered. The hum of electricity deepened, low and familiar. I couldn't breathe. Daniel reached for napkins, dabbing at the spill. His brows knit with concern. "Aaron, hey. "You okay?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to lean into his steadiness, the warmth in his eyes. But behind him, that street lamp continued to buzz, its pitch shifting like the fluorescents back in the library. My stomach turned. "I'm fine," I lied, voice brittle. But I didn't feel fine. I felt watched. The rest of our coffee date blurred. I smiled when he cracked jokes, nodded when he asked questions, but every time I glanced down, my gaze caught on that single cracked nail. It was nothing, it had to be nothing, but my chest tightened until breathing hurt. When we parted, he touched my shoulder lightly. "Same time next week?" I hesitated. His face was open, patient, normal, and yet, when he stepped away, I swore the sound of chains rattled faintly. Just beneath the hum of traffic, the library grew worse. Books no longer merely rearranged themselves, they whispered. Pages fluttered as I passed, words shifting between lines, sliding into new configurations visible only to me. "Stay stone mine." One afternoon, I shelved in the 900s and caught the spine spelling not just my name but full sentences. "You are the archive." The hum above me thickened, vibrating the shelves. My teeth ached with it. When I turned the corner, Victor stood waiting. No pretense anymore. His suit was damp with rain, though the sky outside was clear. His fingernails crumbled dust when he clasped his hands behind his back. "This building breathes with you," he said softly. "Every wall holds memory, every stone holds thought. You are chosen to keep it alive." My pulse thundered. "Chosen by who?" He smiled, revealing teeth that seemed less human now, sharper, angled. "By what endures, by what stands when flesh forgets," I ran, leaving the cart half empty. That night, Daniel called. His voice was calm, grounding. "You've been distant. Want to talk?" I almost confessed everything, the books, the whispers, Victor. But the words clung to my throat like stone dust. I couldn't trust him. I couldn't trust anyone. Instead, I said, "I'm just tired." "Then let me help," he urged. "I can pick you up tomorrow, take you somewhere outside the city. Fresh air might help." For a heartbeat, I wanted it. Escape. A world without buzzing lights and shifting shelves. But the warning from my journal replayed in my head. Don't trust him. I hung up without answering. The following day, Victor appeared not in the library but in my apartment. I woke to find him sitting at the edge of my bed, silhouette framed against the pale glow of the street lamp outside. My body locked. I couldn't scream, couldn't move. He leaned closer. I smelled damp stone, rain-soaked mortar. His hand brushed mine, and I saw his fingernails clearly, stone fissures jagged as though the skin barely contained what lay beneath. "You can't keep running, Aaron," he whispered. "The city is old. It remembers itself through us. Through you. We've always been here. We always will." When I blinked, he was gone. But on the sheets where he'd sat lay a fine grit of dust. Stone dust. I stopped sleeping. Exhaustion hollowed me, blurred the edges of reality. At work, my co-workers' faces seemed too smooth, their eyes glassy, their smiles practiced. Were they his too? Had they always been? One afternoon, I found the answer. Victor guided me, though not with words. The hum of the lights pulled me deeper into the library, into the restricted archives. The air was cold, wet with the mineral tang. There, behind rows of bound newspapers, stood a door I'd never seen. Old oak, etched with carvings worn by time, spirals, stones, eyes. The key was already in my pocket. I don't know how it got there. Inside, I found records not just of Brookfield, but of something older. Maps of the land before the city, marked with standing stones long destroyed. Photographs of monuments I'd never seen, yet when I stared, I recognized them. Like memories too ancient to belong to me. And in one photograph, blurred and gray, stood Victor. The same cracked nails, the same smile. The year scrawled beneath 1892. I dropped the photo. My hands shook so hard I could barely breathe. I fled. I left the library at dusk, rain slicking the streets, headlights warping into smears. My apartment felt unsafe. I didn't want to be alone. Against my better judgment, I called Daniel. He answered on the first ring. Relief cracked my chest when I heard his voice. "Come over," he said. "You sound terrified." "Just come here." So I did. His apartment was warm, lamplight soft. He made tea. His kindness was like a bandage over something rotting. When he touched my arm, I didn't flinch. For the first time in weeks, I felt human contact without revulsion. His hands were steady, nails clean. Maybe I'd imagined it all. Maybe stress had broken me, I wanted to believe that. But later, when I used his bathroom, I froze. The mirror above the sink reflected not just me, but words traced faintly across the glass, as though etched from inside. "He wears many faces." My chest seized. I backed into the door. When I returned to the living room, Daniel sat on the couch waiting. He smiled gently. "Better?" I couldn't answer. My throat locked, and then as he reached for his mug, his sleeve rode up just slightly, revealing the skin at his wrist. Cracked. Pale dust clinging to the crease. I fled. The city itself turned against me. Street lamps buzzed in waves, synchronizing to my steps. Buildings loomed with unnatural angles, shadows bending inward. Monuments I'd passed 100 times now seemed alive, their stone faces weeping fine dust in the rain. I ended up at the oldest site in town, the Soldiers' Monument at Green Hill Square, a granite obelisk that had stood since the 19th century. I'd passed it countless times. That night I couldn't look away. The hum of the street lamps swelled into a roar. The monument's surface shifted, veins of light cracking across it like fissures. And then Victor emerged from the stone itself. His body peeled from the monument's surface, dust cascading as if he'd been carved there all along. "You see now?" he said, voice resonant, echoing with 100 others layered beneath. "We endure through stone, through memory. You are not a victim. You are a vessel." I stumbled back. My breath tore out of me. "Why me?" His cracked hand reached forward. Dust sifted between his fingers. "Because you listen. Because you see. Because you belong to us." Behind him, the obelisk pulsed like a beating heart. Faces shifted in the stone, mouths opening in silent screams. My legs gave way. I dropped to my knees on the wet pavement. He knelt too, inches away. His hand pressed to mine. Stone fingernails scraped my skin. "Say yes," he murmured. "Join us. You'll never be alone again." Tears blurred my vision. My mind screamed to run, to fight, to deny. But somewhere deeper, quieter, a part of me recognized him. Recognized the weight of the buildings, the whispers in the books, the hum of the lights. I'd always heard them. Even as a child, wandering stacks, tracing fingers along spines, I'd felt watched, chosen. The hum intensified until it was all I could hear, drowning out thought. When I tried to scream, the sound died in my throat. The last thing I remember was the taste of dust, sharp and mineral, filling my mouth. I woke in my bed. Morning light spilled through the blinds. My apartment was quiet. No grit on the sheets. No words in the mirror. For a fragile moment, I believed it was over. A dream, a breakdown. Nothing more. Then I noticed the hum, not loud, not obvious. Just faint, beneath the noise of the city outside. The same pitch as the fluorescence. The same vibration that had followed me for weeks. And when I reached for the lamp on my nightstand, my fingernails caught the light. For the first time, I saw the crack. Small, pale, dust clinging at the edges. I was 26 the night I agreed to meet him, and I knew almost immediately that nothing about that evening would be ordinary. My name is Vanessa Calloway, and I worked the late shift as a library assistant at Franklin Park Branch Library, a low brick building tucked between a dry cleaners and a shuttered cafe on East Long Street in Columbus. Most people think libraries are sanctuaries, but after dark, when the last patrons shuffle out and the security alarms click, it becomes something else. A place where silence isn't a comfort but a weight, settling into your chest like water in a glass. I spent my days between the stacks, dusting, cataloging, occasionally helping the rare student who came in after classes. The smell of old paper mixed with the tang of cleaning supplies, the faint hum of fluorescent lights above never quite matched. It was monotonous, safe, predictable, until the night Sarah cornered me behind the circulation desk. "Vanessa, please. You have to meet him. He's different. The kind of man who actually listens," she said, sliding a folded business card across the counter like a secret she wanted me to touch. Her cousin's friend, Victor Hale, 32, an architecture firm owner, she claimed. Serious, grounded, good-hearted. I should have said no. I should have left the card in the drawer and ignored the persistent tug in my chest that wanted to scream. But something in me, the loneliness that had settled in layers over years of quiet evenings, made me slip my number to Sarah's cousin and text him. "Sure, Friday works. Friday." October 13th, 2017. I remember it because of the air, crisp, carrying the smoke of wood-burning fireplaces and the faint decay of leaves on wet sidewalks. I wrapped myself in my burgundy coat, the one that smelled faintly of cedar from last winter, and tried to imagine this evening could be normal. Sarah texted one last reminder as I stepped out. Breathe. It's just dinner, not a lifetime. The restaurant was the Sycamore, warm and inviting, tucked between a bookstore and a hair salon that closed at 6. Its windows glowed like amber lanterns, spilling light into the dark street. Inside, the smell of roasting meat and simmering wine made me relax. I scanned the room. Victor was there. Tall, broad-shouldered, hair dark but streaked with something older. When he said my name, Vanessa, I felt it in my chest, the weight of recognition I didn't understand. He leaned in, kissed my cheek with just enough intimacy to unnerve me, and smiled. Warm, polite, perfect. At first, he was exactly what Sarah promised. He asked about my work, books, favorite quiet corners of the city, but something was off, subtle, almost imperceptible. His questions lingered too long. His gaze was too steady, and when he touched my hand, it was cold. Not the kind of cold that comes from air conditioning or late October wind. It was deep, penetrating. I noticed his fingernails then. Cracked, pitted, yellowed, not with neglect, but with something else. The texture wasn't skin. It reminded me of flaking stone, brittle and ancient. My stomach turned. Don't let people define you by little things, he said softly. His words pressed into me like a weight. I forced a smile, laughed nervously, ignored the chill crawling along my arms. Dinner carried on. Conversation flowed. He asked about my life, hobbies, books, the ordinary details of me I normally kept hidden. But every answer he gave felt rehearsed, as if he had rehearsed my life in advance. When I asked about his firm, he glanced past me toward the window, as if watching a ghost I couldn't see. Buildings outlast people. Stone remembers. It was meant to sound poetic, but I shivered. There was a hardness to his eyes, something unyielding and silent beneath them. I excused myself to the restroom, needing air, needing space, needing reassurance that he wasn't following me in my mind. Inside, I splashed cold water on my face and caught the mirror. For a heartbeat, he was behind me. Not reflected, not a shadow, standing there, lips moving without sound. I spun, heart hammering, and the stall was empty. By the time I returned, he was seated as if nothing happened. After dinner, he offered me a ride. I refused. But outside, the black sedan was there, its engine silent, waiting. My phone flickered. The screen split, static crawling like insects over glass. No service, no signal, no escape. Let me show you something, Vanessa. Just a short drive. I should have said no. I should have run. But I felt my body betray me. The doors closed, locks clicked. The city disappeared. Streetlights vanished. Trees loomed, skeletal and reaching, clawing at the sky. The hum of the engine was too smooth, too constant, like it swallowed the sound of my heart. You hear it? They're calling your name. His voice was soft, distant. Yet everywhere I pressed against the door, trying the locks. Nothing. My reflection shimmered in the window. A pale, trembling girl with someone else's fear pressed against her chest. When he slowed near a stone bridge, crumbling and blackened by age, I acted. I rammed the door, shattered glass, rolled onto gravel, cutting my palms and arms, lungs burning. Behind me, his voice, calm, certain. You can't outrun what waits for you, Vanessa. You've already stepped inside it. I ran until I couldn't. I don't remember getting home. Only blood on my sleeves, terror coiling around my ribs. And a city that no longer felt familiar. The police found nothing. No Victor Hale. No architecture firm. No car. Sarah swore she had seen him, but memory faltered. Hesitation threading through her words. Weeks later, the library became worse. The stack shifted when I wasn't looking. Books fell, not randomly, but deliberately. Call numbers arranged themselves like messages. Vanessa, it remembers you belong. The fluorescent lights above would change pitch almost imperceptibly, buzzing higher when he, or whatever he was near. I tried to convince myself I was imagining things. Until one night, while shelving a new shipment of books, I saw a figure in the corner. Not fully there. Shadows collected into him. A tall man with fingers like cracked stone, smiling just beyond the edge of sight. I began leaving early, avoiding the library when alone, but he didn't need me there. The noises followed me home. Tires crunching gravel outside my window. A shadow passing behind curtains that weren't drawn. His whispers too low to discern, always calling my name. Then Sarah suggested a friend, a young officer she knew, Ryan, someone reasonable, who would listen without dismissing me. For a moment I clung to it. He believed me. He followed the city leads, historical sites Victor might be tied to. He even came to the library at closing, promising protection, checking locks, tracing every detail. I allowed myself a fragile hope. But even Ryan couldn't explain the old courthouse on North High Street. Legend said it had been built over a quarry, the stone rumored to be cursed to remember wrongs committed on it. And there in the library I understood. Victor was not a man. Not fully. He was something ancient, tethered to memory and stone. He watched, waited, remembered, and I had become part of his ledger. By the time Ryan realized he could do nothing to protect me, it was too late. The stone whispers followed me, the subtle rearrangements of books spelling my name over and over. And when I looked into mirrors, I sometimes caught him behind me, just a silhouette, just a shape with fingernails like cracked marble. Weeks bled into months. My world constricted. I stopped leaving home except for necessities. Grocery trips were swift. I walked past streets I had known all my life and felt a creeping alienation, like the city itself remembered me differently. The library was the worst. Closing the doors, counting shelves, running my fingers along spines, it should have been comforting. It was now hostile. The lights hummed with a higher, shrill tone when he was near. Books tumbled, not with gravity but intention. Call numbers rearranged themselves. You cannot hide, you belong. I began sleeping with the lights on. Every noise, the scrape of a chair, the drip of a faucet, set my nerves on fire. Every shadow seemed to curl toward me. One evening, desperate, I called Ryan. He had tried to help me, truly tried. He didn't laugh, didn't dismiss. He came over, and for a moment I felt safe. He helped board up a few windows, installed a motion sensor camera. He even accompanied me to the library once, staying late while I tried to catalog returned books. But that night, in the silence of the stacks, it happened again. The books shifted. My name appeared, etched into the dust along the shelves, and in the mirror behind the checkout desk I saw a reflection that wasn't mine. His shape, tall, fingers like fractured stone, eyes darker than any human eye could be. Ryan saw nothing. But I felt it, everywhere, the pressure, the weight of memory pressing down on me. And then he whispered, not words, not sounds, just the vibration through the air, my name. My full name. I ran. Out the side door. Into the alley. And there, on the bricks of the old courthouse, I saw his mark. A deep, vertical crack splitting the stone, as if it were the outline of his hand. I knew then he wasn't just watching. He was bound to the city, to the buildings, to the stones themselves. He could reach through memory, through reflection, through any thin place that touched me. Ryan tried to protect me. Tried to explain it as a psychological phenomenon, as trauma manifesting. But how could he? He didn't see the fingers cracking like stone, didn't hear my name rolling through the air like a drum beat, didn't feel the static pulse in the fluorescent lights. The weeks became a ritual of avoidance and paranoia. I refused invitations, stopped answering calls. The whispers followed. Tires on gravel, shadows in windows, reflections that moved before I did. Even in my dreams, he waited at the edge, smiling, fingernails like old stone scraping air. And yet he never fully revealed himself. The threat remained ambiguous, almost polite, almost patient, until one night walking home from the corner store I passed the library. The windows glowed empty and warm as ever, and in one pane I saw him, not fully, not in flesh, but in angles and shadow. He was pressing a hand to the glass. I saw the fingernails, cracked, jagged like stone that had spent centuries in darkness, and for the first time I understood the full scope of it. He had waited, remembered, and now I had become part of the ledger he carried across the city. I ran. Not home, not anywhere familiar, just ran until the city was unfamiliar, until the streets were skeletal and clawing like the trees from that night months ago, and still his voice reached me, whispering, low, insistent, my name, my full name. I thought about calling Ryan, but I knew he couldn't help. He never could. And I realized then that the false hope, the ordinary human who believed me, who tried to anchor me to reality, was just another layer of the trap. Victor, the entity, the thing that remembered everything, allowed hope to flourish only to make the return sharper, the edge of fear more precise. Now in my apartment, I sit in the corner of the living room, lights flickering, the hum of electricity changing pitch, and I feel the weight of stone memory pressing through the walls. I don't know if he follows physically anymore, or if the city itself is his instrument, whispering through bricks, mortar, and the faint echo in every reflective surface. I can see the traces of him everywhere, on building facades, in the angle of shadows and reflections that linger a second too long. I hear the gravel outside. I hear tires, the scrape of stone, the whisper of my name in the hum of fluorescent light even in my apartment. And I know it isn't safe anywhere. He doesn't need me to move. He only needs me to remember, and I do. Every day, every night, I remember. And that, I fear, is enough for him. First dates are supposed to be beginnings. Mine was a doorway, and I have stepped through it, and it never closes. I was 23 the night I agreed to let someone take me out again. My name is Claire Sutton, and even now, years later, I can still feel the weight of that decision pressing against me, like the bruise of a secret I should never have touched. I had only recently moved back to Asheville, North Carolina, after trying and failing to build a different life somewhere else. Returning home felt like surrender, and the only job I'd been able to hold down was working evenings at Redfern's Bookshop and Cafe, 12 Biltmore Avenue. The place was cozy in that curated way. Brick walls, floor-to-ceiling shelves, soft lamps glowing amber through paper shades. On paper, it was a dream job, but to me it felt temporary. A pause between breaths. A waiting room I couldn't leave. That September night in 2018 still hangs over me like smoke. The rain outside had been falling in soft sheets, blurring headlights into streaks of white fire. I'd told myself I was too tired, too drenched in routine to risk something as fragile as a date. But then the bell over the cafe door chimed, and he was there again, Mason Wilder. He had visited twice before. Always quiet, always drifting toward the poetry section as if drawn by a string. He'd linger, fingers trailing the spines of books he never bought. And sometimes his eyes would catch mine just a second too long. He smiled like someone asking permission to exist. That night his smile deepened. And when he asked me to dinner, I said yes before I could stop myself. Later, Lydia teased me as she perched on the edge of my bed, watching me wrestle with my hair. Lydia was my roommate, sharp-eyed and always too quick with advice I wasn't ready for. Don't overthink it, Claire. He seems normal. That word clung to me like a plea. Normal had betrayed me before, but I forced my trembling hands to fasten my necklace anyway. Lydia didn't notice. She never did. Mason arrived in a silver sedan that looked as worn but carefully kept as he did. He opened the door for me, polite to the point of stiffness. When he smiled, it was as if he had practiced it in the mirror. The restaurant was dim, lit by amber lamps that cast pools of honey-colored light across each table. The air smelled of rosemary, charred meat, and faint wood smoke. For a while, I allowed myself to believe this was safe. Mason asked questions, his voice low and even. He asked about my degree I never used, my mother's illness, my failures, my roots. The details landed with surgical precision, too exact to be coincidence. I swallowed hard, laughed too loudly. Maybe I had mentioned them in passing. Maybe I had forgotten. But then his voice sharpened as he leaned across the candlelight, eyes fixed to mine, and whispered the words that froze me in place. The exact way my father had died. My chest went cold. I excused myself, forced my legs to carry me to the restroom. The cracked mirror reflected back a pale stranger I barely recognized. The fluorescent lights hummed, buzzing in uneven pulses that made the edges of my vision sway. My skin prickled as if something unseen had brushed against me. When I returned, Mason was gone. His wine glass trembled as if touched seconds before. A freckled waiter approached, hesitant, his voice hushed. "Were you with him?" I nodded. "Be careful leaving." His eyes avoided mine. Outside, the rain had stopped. Mason's car idled at the curb, door open. When I looked inside, the driver's seat was soaked through. Not damp, soaked as if someone had been sitting in a storm that no longer existed. I ran. Boots striking against wet cobblestones, lungs burning. I didn't stop until I reached the apartment, collapsing on the kitchen floor in silence. Lydia found me hours later, trembling, words locked in my throat. The next morning I called the police. No record of a Mason Wilder existed in Asheville. No license, no address, no trace. Lydia suggested maybe I'd misheard his name, that maybe the wine had gotten to me. But I knew what I'd heard. What I'd felt, I tried to return to normal. At Redfern's, I shelved books, wiped tables, made small talk. But when the cafe closed and the lamps clicked off one by one, the silence grew heavy. That's when I heard it. My father's voice whispering my name from the darkened aisles. The exact cadence Mason had repeated. I told myself it was grief, memory bleeding into imagination. But grief doesn't move things. Grief doesn't leave books stacked where you hadn't left them. Grief doesn't make a childhood marble. The blue one I'd lost at age 6 appear on my nightstand. The first time it happened, I screamed. Lydia rushed in, demanding answers I couldn't give. She found nothing strange about a marble. To her, it was just an old trinket. But to me, it was a piece of my past no one else could have known. Weeks passed. The cafe grew colder, the air heavy with something I couldn't name. The fluorescent hum above the counter started changing pitch, sometimes swelling until my teeth ached. Every time the voice followed, whispering, calling. One evening, while locking up, I caught sight of someone across the street. The freckled waiter. His face pale, eyes wide with recognition. He opened his mouth, forming a word I couldn't hear. A warning, silent but urgent. When I blinked, he was gone. He left town days later. No one knew where. The false hope came when I met Detective Harris. He arrived at Redfern's after Lydia, desperate for reassurance, had filed a wellness check. He was older, kind-eyed, carrying himself like someone used to being trusted. He listened as I told him about Mason, about the car, about the voice. I expected him to laugh to dismiss me. Instead, he leaned back, fingers steepled. It sounds like a misunderstanding, Claire. People lie about who they are all the time. Maybe Mason gave you a fake name. Maybe you're under a lot of stress. His tone was gentle, rational. For a moment, I wanted to believe him, to believe it had been nothing more than coincidence and nerves. He promised to check records again, to follow up. His steady presence made me breathe easier, as if the edges of the nightmare had finally started to soften. For the first time in weeks, I slept, dreamless, unbroken, normal. But the next morning, I woke to find every book on my shelf turned backward, spines facing the wall. And on the pillow beside me lay another object from childhood. My father's silver pocket knife, the initials still scratched on the handle. An object buried with him. The hum from the ceiling light above my bed swelled like a wasp nest ready to burst. And beneath it, from somewhere too close to be anywhere real, I heard the voice again. Claire. This time it wasn't my father's tone. It was Mason's. I didn't go into work that day. I couldn't. My body felt like it belonged to someone else, like every muscle had been rewired overnight. I sat in the kitchen, staring at the pocket knife, trying to tell myself it wasn't real. It couldn't be. My father had been buried with that knife. I'd watched the coffin lowered into the ground. I'd touched the wood before the soil covered it, and yet it lay there on my pillow. Cold, heavy, etched with his initials. When Lydia returned that evening, I showed her. She held it in her hand, examined it like it was just another object. You're sure this is the same one? She asked. Positive. Then maybe someone in your family. No one else had it. It was buried with him, her mouth tightened. She set it down carefully like she didn't want to touch it anymore. Claire, maybe you need to take a break from the cafe. From this apartment. From all of it. I wanted to argue, but the truth was the thought of stepping back into Redfern's made me nauseous. The aisles, the lamps, the hum. The way the silence pressed in when the doors were locked. I couldn't separate the cafe from him anymore. From Mason, from my father's voice, from whatever was happening. Detective Harris followed up 2 days later. He met me at a small diner on the edge of town, sliding into the booth across from me with a coffee in hand. His presence was steadying even if his words weren't. No new records, no driver's license, no bank accounts, nothing under Mason Wilder. I'm not saying you imagined him, Claire, just sometimes people give us pieces of themselves and hide the rest. It doesn't mean it's supernatural. I wanted to believe him. He even smiled, trying to soften the edges of his dismissal. Focus on what's real. Your job, your roommate, your life here. For a moment, I leaned into the warmth of his voice. a fragile thread of hope that maybe this was nothing more than a con man, a liar I could forget. But as he spoke, I felt it again. The low vibration, the fluorescent hum above our booth even though no lamp was there. My stomach twisted. Harris's words blurred into static as the sound drilled deeper into me. Louder, sharper, until I wanted to scream. Then it stopped, just as suddenly as it began. He didn't notice. He never heard it. That night I returned home to find the books turned again. Not backward this time, but arranged in a circle on the living room floor. At the center sat another relic, a hair ribbon I'd worn as a child, faded pink, still carrying the faint scent of lilacs from my mother's dresser. Lydia swore she hadn't touched it. My knees gave out beneath me. I began sleeping on the couch, but even there I wasn't safe. Some mornings I'd wake to find the cushions damp as though rain had soaked through. I started hearing whispers from the kitchen when I was alone. They weren't always my father's voice anymore. Sometimes they were Mason's. Sometimes they were both, overlapping, inseparable. The last time I saw the waiter was by accident. I was walking home from the grocery store and there he was, standing across the street. His face was pale, hollowed out. He didn't wave. Didn't move closer, just stared at me, lips shaping a word I couldn't make out. Again and again his mouth formed the same sound, urgent, desperate, and then he was gone. When I crossed the street, the sidewalk was empty. 2 days later, I heard he'd left town without telling anyone. I couldn't shake the image of his mouth. The unspoken word gnawed at me in the dark. The breaking point came on a Sunday night. Lydia was asleep. I sat alone at the kitchen table, every light in the apartment blazing, but the hum was still there. Deep, resonant, vibrating through the walls, rattling inside my skull. I pressed my hands over my ears, but it only grew louder. Then the lights began to flicker one by one. The pocket knife lay on the table. The blade snapped open on its own, and then the voice came clear, near. Claire. Not my father's, not Mason's, both. Layered, twisted together like one being. The apartment door creaked open, though it was locked. My body froze. The hum reached a pitch so high it was almost silence. I forced myself to look. Mason's silver sedan idled outside the window, engine running, door open. The same impossible image. Waiting. I stumbled toward the door, heart ricocheting against my ribs. Part of me wanted to run, to leave the building, the city, everything. Another part of me wanted to end it, to face whatever waited, to demand answers. I stepped outside. The night was still, streets empty, no rain. The sedan purred at the curb. The driver's seat gleamed wet, soaked through as if a storm had passed only inside the car. From the back seat came the sound of shifting weight. Slow, deliberate. And then a whisper. So close it might have been in my own ear. Get in. My breath tore from my throat. I couldn't move. The car idled, patient, waiting. Behind me, every light in the apartment flickered and died, leaving me in darkness but for the glow of the headlights. I stood there trembling, caught between escape and surrender, knowing that either way something had already claimed me. And as I stared into the open car door, I realized the worst part wasn't the voice or the hum, or even Mason's absence. The worst part was how much of me wanted to listen. I was 31 when I first decided that maybe I was meant for a small life. That thought never came to me like lightning or prophecy. It just accumulated layer by layer, like dust on furniture you stop noticing, until one day the sunlight hits it in the right way. I woke up each morning in the same one-bedroom apartment, folded myself into the same black skirt and blazer, walked into the same building on East Wacker Drive, and sat under the same fluorescent light that drained color from my skin. I worked as a claims adjuster at Bremer & Sons Insurance. My job wasn't glamorous. It wasn't even interesting. People called when things broke or when they were scared, and I filled in forms and processed numbers until the stories became columns in spreadsheets. Some days I felt like I was dissolving into the cells themselves, just a thin outline of a woman faintly imprinted between formulas. Nights weren't better. I cooked for one, washed dishes for one, fell asleep with the television humming so the silence wouldn't get too loud. There were no pets, no friends dropping by unannounced, no lover calling to say they missed me. Just me, my ceiling, and the occasional insomnia that left me staring into the dark, wondering if this was all my life would ever be. So when the firm's holiday party rolled around on December 15th, 2019, I told myself I'd skip it. No one would miss me. But at the last second, guilt or maybe loneliness got the better of me. I put on a black dress that felt too tight around the waist, brushed my hair 3 times longer than usual, and took a ride-share to the Radcliffe Hotel. The banquet hall glowed with gold lights, mirrored walls, and the smell of roasted meat. People laughed too loud, their teeth flashing like currency, their laughter brittle with effort. I stood at the bar with a whiskey, wishing I'd stayed home. That's when I saw her, Rachel. She wore a maroon dress that clung to her like it had been sewn with her in mind. She stood half-tucked into a shadowed corner, posture straight, head slightly tilted like she was listening to music no one else could hear. She didn't fidget or scan the room the way everyone else did. She just watched, calm, waiting. I wasn't the only one who noticed her. People approached her, men, women, colleagues I knew only by name. They'd smile, say something, linger a moment too long, then retreat with their faces tight, their expressions unsettled, like they'd touched something hot without meaning to. She didn't follow them. She didn't even seem to care. Her eyes found me, not just glancing, finding, as if I had been singled out long before I even arrived. When she finally stepped onto the balcony beside me, the night air pinching our skin with frost, it felt less like coincidence and more like gravity. "Cold night for a drink," she said. Her voice was low and smooth, the kind that didn't need to raise itself to be heard. "Cold night for anything," I replied, immediately wishing I'd said something better. But she smiled. Not politely, not vaguely. She smiled like she had been waiting for my exact words, as though I had passed some invisible test. Her questions started simple. Where I was from, if I had family nearby, what I did for work. But she asked them like an investigator, listening to pauses, watching my hands. And when she slipped into the deeper questions, about my parents' divorce, about the ex who left me crying in an empty apartment, about the humiliations I'd never spoken aloud, I answered. Without hesitation. That was the strange part. I didn't feel invaded. I felt relieved, like she was siphoning the loneliness out of me drop by drop. At one point, when I mentioned I hadn't spoken to my sister in weeks, she tilted her head. "Claire, right? Lives out in Oak Brook now." I froze. "How did you—" "You told me," she said quickly, smoothly. But I knew I hadn't. I would have remembered. Still, I let it slide, because the warmth of her attention outweighed the chill crawling down my spine. When she leaned closer and whispered, "This feels like a first date, doesn't it?" I laughed, too fast, but I wanted it to be true. Back in my apartment later that night, she was barefoot on my couch, her maroon dress folded over her knees, her hair loose like she'd shed the hotel along with her shoes. She looked at home in a way no one ever had there before. My living room felt smaller, yes, but also fuller, alive. Then my phone buzzed. It was my sister, I answered. And when I said the words, "I'm with a friend," the air changed. Her smile thinned into something sharp. "So I'm just a friend?" Her hand tightened around the wine glass. The stem groaned under pressure. Her eyes flicked dark, reflecting something I couldn't quite see, something that looked less like my lamp and more like nothing at all. She told me then, soft and furious, about the man who had lied to her, about how she had ended it, about time and a war that didn't fix anything. Her words slid between anger and vulnerability like oil across water. I tried to steady the conversation, but it cracked too quickly, intimacy splintering into accusation. Then the knife, the lunge, the metallic smell of fear, the scrape of glass under my feet, the slam of my head against plaster. I fought with stupid, animal strength, swinging a wine bottle until it shattered. She fell, bleeding still for a beat that stretched too long, and then she was gone. When the police arrived hours later, the apartment looked wrong. A mess, yes, but no sign of her. Just broken glass, a smear of wine, and me trembling, incoherent. They told me she'd been discharged from a psychiatric facility weeks earlier, released, as though a signature on paper erased her presence in my living room. I moved out 3 days later. Changed my number, packed my life into boxes and fled. But in the new apartment sometimes, the knocks come, slow, deliberate. I freeze and pretend not to hear them, because the worst part isn't that she hurt me, it's that she made me feel seen. And when I stand in the silence, every fiber of me screaming not to answer. There's another truth pressing harder against my chest. Sometimes, the fear of being alone feels heavier than the fear of opening the door. The first knock came a week after I moved into the new apartment. It was around 2 a.m., a time when even the city outside seemed hushed, like the streets had emptied themselves into some other dimension. I had been lying awake, scrolling through meaningless feeds, letting the blue glow wash over me. Then, 3 knocks, slow, deliberate, not the impatient pounding of a drunk neighbor, not the hurried rap of a delivery gone wrong. No, this was something practiced, patient. I sat up, phone frozen in my hand. The hallway light I kept on for comfort painted a yellow wedge across the carpet near the door. I didn't move. I barely breathed. The knocks didn't come again. Not that night, but after that they started to return, never at the same hour. Always slow, always deliberate. I told myself it wasn't her. Couldn't be her. She had vanished that night, erased herself as though she'd never existed. The police had implied she wasn't dangerous anymore, that she'd been discharged, stabilized, normal. But I knew. My body knew. The tremor in my hands knew. What I couldn't reconcile was how much I wanted it to be her. Loneliness has a way of curdling into something desperate. You tell yourself you'd rather be safe, untouched, alone. But when the nights stretch on too long and the silence starts to press down like a weight on your chest, the fear of being alone feels heavier than the fear of being hurt. That's the trick loneliness plays. It convinces you that even the wrong presence is better than none at all. The second time the knocking came, I almost opened the door. I stood there with my hand on the chain, my ear pressed against the wood. I whispered, "Who's there?" My voice sounded smaller than I expected. No answer. Only the faintest breath, as though the air on the other side was heavier, thicker, shaped by someone waiting. When I backed away, I swore I heard a laugh. Quiet, feminine, almost affectionate. I started seeing her in places she shouldn't be. A flash of maroon fabric in the grocery store aisle. A reflection in a bus window that didn't belong to anyone seated near me. Once, walking home from work, I caught my reflection in a storefront glass, and for the briefest moment, her smile looked back at me instead of my own. I stopped answering my sister's calls. Not because I didn't want to hear her voice, but because every time my phone lit up with her name, I remembered Rachel saying it. The way she'd known, the way she'd said Claire, right? Lives out in Oakbrook now? As if she'd been reading my life off a page. How had she known? I still don't know, but loneliness doesn't ask for answers. It just aches. One night I dreamed of her. She was on my couch again, barefoot, the maroon dress folded neatly over her knees. She smiled at me, not sharp this time, not furious, soft, patient, like she had all the time in the world. She reached out, touched my cheek and said, "You don't have to be alone anymore." When I woke, my cheek was damp, as if a hand had been resting there. The knocks grew bolder after that. Sometimes, I'd hear them followed by the rattle of the knob, the scrape of metal against metal like someone trying to learn the shape of my lock. Other times I'd hear my name, soft, whispered, coaxing. Open the door. Just a minute, just a smile. First date, remember? I stopped sleeping. My work performance collapsed. Colleagues whispered that I looked unwell. They weren't wrong. My skin grew pale, my eyes bruised. I thought of telling someone, my sister, maybe even the police. But what could I say? That a woman who didn't officially exist anymore was knocking on my door at night, whispering things she shouldn't know. They'd call it stress, paranoia, trauma, and maybe they'd be right. Maybe it was all in my head. But the bruises on my cheekbones where I swore she touched me said otherwise. Loneliness kept tugging at me. Every time the knocks came, the fear cracked a little, and beneath it, the ache spoke louder. Open the door. At least you won't be alone. At least someone sees you. I started sitting by the door some nights, back against the wood, knees drawn up, listening. Sometimes I whispered back. Nothing coherent, just small words like please or why. Sometimes I thought I heard her answer, though the sound was so faint I couldn't be sure if it was real or if it was just my own voice folding back in on me. The worst was the night I almost turned the key. My fingers trembled on the lock, my breath shallow, and I told myself I would just look, just peek, just make sure there was nothing there. But something, some last thread of fear stopped me. Instead, I collapsed to the floor, shaking, crying, hating myself for wanting it so badly. That night, when I finally crawled to bed, I dreamed again. But this time it wasn't her on the couch, it was me. I was barefoot in her maroon dress, smiling at myself from across the room. The next morning, the wine glass I'd unpacked weeks ago was sitting on my counter, full. Red liquid catching the light. I don't drink red wine. I hadn't poured it. The dread wasn't sharp anymore. It was slow, insidious, like mold creeping along the edges of wallpaper. It wasn't just her haunting me anymore. It was her becoming me, sliding into the cracks loneliness had left behind. I tried leaving the apartment once, suitcase in hand, intent on staying at a hotel. But when I reached the hallway, the exit sign flickering at the far end, the air turned cold. The walls seemed to bend inward. And there, at the far end, I swore I saw her. Or me. I can't be sure anymore. Maroon dress, barefoot, watching. I dropped the suitcase, ran back inside, slammed the door. That was 2 days ago. I haven't tried leaving again. Tonight, the knocking has come back. Louder, steadier. Each knock reverberates through the floorboards, through my chest. I press my forehead against the door. The wood is cold. The silence on the other side feels alive. My hand trembles as I slide the chain free. I don't even know why I'm doing it anymore. Fear, loneliness, compulsion. It's all knotted together. I lean forward, put my eye to the peephole, and I see myself, my own face staring back. Smiling, the kind of smile that isn't joy but possession. A glint in the eyes that doesn't belong to me. And in that moment I know, she doesn't need to break in. She's already inside.